Hello and welcome to the next session of the WordPress Accessibility Day. I am your host, Mike Demo, and helping us in the chat moderator is Kayla Demopoulos. Our next session is going to be by Joe Hall. Joe has been a WordPress developer and SEO for the last 11 years. He first became interested in accessibility consulting back in the 90s, but mostly does technical SEO for medium-sized companies, nonprofit, and enterprise-level brands. He is passionate about accessible, highly optimized, and fast WordPress themes. Joe's talk is going to be about SEO and web accessibility partners for a better internet. If you have any questions, please make sure to put them into the chat and we will get those at the end. And please remember that there is a code of conduct for this event and we're all part of the same WordPress community. With that, thank you so much and welcome, Joe.
I am looking forward to this conversation. I'm going to start my slides here. Okay, so this talk is called SEO and Web Accessibility Partners for a Better Internet. And I'm going to get started here. Okay, so let's get started with some definitions. This talk is geared towards folks that are interested in SEO, but also for folks that are interested in accessibility, obviously. And so, because we're talking to two separate groups, I thought it might be smart to do some basic definitions so that we're all on the same page. And so when we talk about web accessibility, um, web accessibility is the inclusive practice of ensuring there is no barriers that prevent interaction with or access to websites on the World Wide Web for people with all types of disabilities. And when we talk about SEO, we're talking about search engine optimization, the process of increasing the quality and quantity of website traffic by increasing the visibility of a website or web page to users of a web search engine. This may involve increasing rankings found within the results or improving the presentation of existing listings or rankings. And something, one of the really interesting aspects of SEO and web accessibility as a practice, if this is something you do professionally or you're just interested in it, these two things can influence many of the same areas of product development. So they both touch on user experience, design and information architecture, content development and content optimization, and technical infrastructure. So it makes sense that if there are so many overlapping areas, that we should be working closer together with each other. Um, it might be smart to go to dispel some myths, because there are lots of myths around both practices, and it's smart to be on the same page. So, myth number one: accessibility is only focused on improving access for the visually impaired. I see a lot of SEOs with this myth, and the truth is that accessibility is focused on lots of different types of disabilities, visual impairments, motor and mobility impairments, auditory or hearing impairments, seizure disorders, cognitive or intellectual disabilities. So we're talking about a cross disability spectrum, not just visual impairments. Myth number two: SEO is only about optimizing content with keywords. So this comes up a lot with folks that have sort of a cursory understanding of SEO. But the truth is that SEO follows technical best practices. It looks at external signals such as links or citations. It informs the design or information architecture process. And then, of course, it does focus on content optimization. Another myth that I hear a lot of SEOs make is that excellent SEO means full accessibility, or vice versa, that full accessibility means excellent SEO. And we'll take a look in this talk about how the two practices uh, overlap each other and how having good accessibility can mean in some ways that you're doing the right thing for SEO, and then vice versa with SEO for accessibility. But it's a myth to assume that just because you have great accessibility, that somehow you're going to do really well with SEO, or that just because you have great SEO that your website is accessible. That's just not the case, and we'll look into that in a moment. So let's start talking about some of the areas of overlap and conflict. I've put together a Venn diagram here, and everything that's listed on this diagram is, of course, not a complete list of either practice. This is just an example of some of the things that might be found in each area, and how some things overlap. And on the uh, on the left side here, I have SEO, and in the SEO quadrant of this Venn diagram, I have listed page speed, structured data, external links, mobile indexing, and AMP. Um, and then on the accessibility only section of the Venn diagram, I have ARIA, screen readers, HTML landmarks, keyboard access, and form optimization. Some of the main, shared areas that overlap between SEO and accessibility are information architecture, the use of anchor text, content optimization, and media optimization. And so we'll take a look at some of these overlapping areas now and see how they work together and how sometimes they can cause conflicts as well. So we'll start off with information architecture. So with navigation items, um, for SEO, navigation items should follow the information architecture, have simple but descriptive labels, and point to main sections of the site. And for SEO, this is great because these help build internal links site wide, which helps spread link equity and helps the search engines find all the main sections of the site. For accessibility, navigation items should have simple and descriptive labels. And this is, primarily for ease of navigation, and those navigation items should be easy for the user to understand and find um, easily. Under word list. So in HTML, we have different types of lists. We have unordered list and numbered list. Typically, when we're making an information architecture or navigation, we'll use an unordered list, and then also we'll use it also for things like tertiary navigation as well on the page. Search engines prefer organized content and clean HTML for navigation. So an unordered list is really great for search engines because they can easily understand that these links belong together as a set, and they'll either parse those as uh, parts of uh, the featured snippet if you're doing things like featured snippet optimization, or other things. But for accessibility, screen readers will parse unordered list of links for menus. And so it's really helpful to think about organizing, your navigation, especially sub navigation or tertiary navigations, into unordered list for both SEO and accessibility. Anchor text. So this is our first item that has a little bit of conflict. We'll start with the SEO part of it. Search engines use anchor text to associate keywords within target pages that those links are linked to. And so when we talk about anchor text, we're talking about the text found within a link. And so for SEO, search engines use that text to associate the terminology that should be associated with the page that the link is pointing to. And then for accessibility, screen readers will list links independently of content, and therefore anchor text should not rely on the context of the content um, it is found in. So, in other words, your anchor text should never be like, click here or, download this, that kind of thing. It should always be descriptive of the page that it's linking to, so that when those links are pulled out of the content and made into a independent navigation menu, it's easy to understand what those links go to. Some conflicts. So SEOs have a tendency to stuff a bunch of keywords within anchor text. Like I said before, it's because that anchor text can influence the terms that the search engines will associate with that target page. And so you want to make sure that as you are optimizing your anchor text, that anchor text is also useful for accessibility. You don't want to just jam up a bunch of keywords in your anchor text so that when those links are taken out of the content to make a menu, they still have to make sense. So it's really important for SEOs not to just jam up a bunch of keywords into the anchor text and make for a bad navigation for screen readers. Let's look at content optimization. So heading tags, these are like your H1, H2, H3 tags. For SEO, they should structure the content with main and subheadings, use tags consecutively, and include the target terms. And generally, you want to use like one H1 tag per page, and then underneath that, use consecutive order. H2, H3, H4. You know, on down. For accessibility, screen readers use these heading tags for content navigation. And so again, you want to use the same structure they would use for SEO, and use a very descriptive uh, content within the heading tags that would describe the content for that section of the page. And so a good balance for SEO and accessibility is that you can label these heading tags with content that includes descriptive keywords that also describe the content that um, the headings represent. Um, Title tags. So title tags are a very important part of SEO. And so title tags should include unique targeted keywords for rankings, and increase click-through rates. For accessibility, title tags should include unique terms for navigation. Now, a conflict that I see sometimes is that SEOs sometimes include marketing language in the content, in the title tags, such as click through calls to action to increase click through rates. And so basically, the reason this happens is because the search snippet, the what you see within the search results, that title there is taken from the title tag, and so SEOs oftentimes like to write kind of eye popping marketing language within the title tag to get users to click on their search result within the search rankings. And that's fine, but a problem with that is that that could get in the way of providing a useful navigation item. If you think about title tags as sort of a way to navigate through the pages, either through using tabs on your browser or navigation within a list of bookmarks, that kind of thing. You should always kind of keep your title tags as easy to understand as possible. And you can find a good balance between having a good call to action, but also making it so it's kind of concise and easy to understand. That's the best method. Um, so keywords and language. So you want to use keywords for SEO in a natural way. Historically, SEOs have been kind of notorious about, you know, pumping a bunch of keywords into content, and trying to kind of force their content into the results. That's no longer as popular anymore as it used to be, which is a good thing, because for accessibility, content should adhere to good readability standards and should be easily understood. These two things really go together in my mind because the search engines are starting to employ more and more natural language processing, which attempts to understand the content the way a human being would read it. And so, therefore, using a bunch of targeted keywords and writing your content in a way that doesn't sound natural, maybe not so smart for either SEO or accessibility. So it's always good to use natural language, and to use content that makes sense both for all users, search engines and human beings. Hidden content. So I saw this mentioned earlier today, in someone's talk, and for SEO, hidden content is not detected by search engines, and in some cases, it can be a violation of their quality guidelines. In accessibility, you can hide content from visual users, but then make it accessible to screen readers. And so there's different reasons why you might want to do this. So, for example, you might have a completely separate navigation just for screen readers, but you don't want that navigation to be visible to users, visual users. Um, and that's understandable. But accessibility professionals should not hide content that is critical for SEO. And this is just kind of common sense in a way because if we follow the principles of universal design, then we are making all of the content, kind of equally accessible to all different users. And so, if there's a special case where, okay, you have to hide a certain navigation just for screen readers, that's understandable. But if you are hiding content just for screen readers and some of that content has links in it that is not available to the visual users, then those links are not going to be used for SEO. So just keep in mind that when you're hiding content, you need to keep things equal on both ends. That same content that maybe is hidden from visual users needs to be kind of represented in some way, especially internal links, because those are very important for SEO. So media optimization. So one of the things that SEOs talk about whenever accessibility comes up is alt tags for images. And SEOs uh, tend to like to optimize alt text for images, because search engines utilize the text found in alt attributes to associate keywords or an understanding of the image. And so I think initially when search engines started doing this, it was a really great idea because, if you use the alt tags the way they're supposed to be, then you will include a very descriptive description of the image. And so obviously the search engines thought, oh, we can just take those out and we'll know what the image is then. And I think that's true still today. However, one of the conflicts I found is that SEOs generally don't write very good alt text. They just stuff the alt text full of keywords. Um, and I've actually noticed where it's becoming commonplace in WordPress to basically just take like the title of the post and pop that into the image alt text, or even if you're using something like WooCommerce, sometimes they'll take like the product name and put that into the alt text of the product image. In some cases, that stuff works, but if if you're a blogger and you're writing about something, and you have an image in your article, it's likely that the title of the blog post is not going to match up with the description of the image that you're posting. So it's really important not to do that kind of stuff. Um, and it's a really easy way, I think, to optimize the alt text, because if you have like 200 images that are missing alt text, it's super easy just to go in and change your WordPress theme to do that. But in the end, it doesn't really serve your users that use screen readers very much at all. And oftentimes, it actually doesn't really provide much value for SEO either, because they're not really a good description of the image at all either. So it is kind of a pain in the butt, but it's always better to write your own alt text by hand and not try to optimize it or automate it. Um, Videos. So I see a lot of folks that do videos, and the obvious accessibility approach to videos is to include closed captioning, and closed captioning is has become relatively more accepted and a lot easier to implement on lots of different platforms. For SEO, what you can do is you can take the same transcript for the closed captions and utilize that for SEO content. So you can put that on the same page as the video. If you have an embedded video, you can totally just take the closed captioning content and then put that on the same page as a video transcript, and that turns into really great optimized SEO friendly content for the video. Um, and the same thing for podcast. You can do the same thing for podcasts. Podcasts are very popular now. If you have an audio transcript, that can be placed on the same page as the podcast is embedded in. And that creates a really great thing for SEO, and also for screen readers that would just read the audio transcript that's on the page where the podcast is embedded. So that wraps up the majority of this talk, and the talk went a little faster than I anticipated, but I do have some closing thoughts. So the best way to optimize for both accessibility and SEO is to work alongside amazing professionals that specialize in each. And I really can't stress this enough, because I feel like SEO and accessibility, because it touches on so many different areas, and because each one of the practices can be very detail oriented and very specific to different types of websites, or very specific and different types of clients. It's really difficult to be a jack or Jane of all trades, and do both. So I would encourage everyone to make friends with an SEO or an accessibility professional, and encourage them to work alongside you, and develop projects together, and share in your own experience to build better products. Of course, you can both learn about each other's fields, and do the best you can. But it's really important to have someone that really knows what they're doing, and with lots of experience. My name is Joe Hall, and you can reach me at these websites. And at the end here, I've included some more reading for the SEO folks. Here's some further reading on accessibility. And then for the accessibility folks, here is some further reading on SEO. That is it.
Cool. Great job. A lot of great information in there, Joe. So we have some questions that we're going to go through, and we'll see how many questions we have time for. If you still have questions, that's cool. Kayla's still posting them. Please just put them into the chat. So the first question is, do you have any recommendations for making sure you're using appropriate language for users and SEO?
I think that you need to uh, primarily, I'm sorry, Mike, did you say for users and SEO or for accessibility and SEO?
Sure. Let me repeat it. Do you have any recommendations for making sure you are using appropriate language for users and SEO?
Okay, so you should just, I mean, really, you should write um, like you would if you were not focused on SEO. I mean, in my opinion, there are lots and lots of factors that go into ranking a web page. And if you are mindful of the types of terms that you want that web page to rank for, you can utilize those terms, um, intentionally here and there. But you don't need to. You don't need to. You don't need to. You don't need to over optimize and use too much. You can just use your natural language and talk as if you would in any other format. Use some terminology intentionally if you are thinking of certain things, but just talk like you normally would. You know.
Sure. And a similar question that I actually have is, how do you SEO for language, now that pronouns are becoming a bit, different, and, there could be they, them pronouns. Is SEO catching up when you use those less traditional pronouns in your copy?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I had never thought of that. So I think that one of the things that we talk about SEO is something called query intent. And so understanding why someone is searching for your content, and um, I can't imagine a situation where gendered pronouns would like really be required, because a lot of times when we think about SEO, we're thinking about proper nouns. Like we're thinking about like you know the names of things and people. And so I don't think that it really matters too much about what kind of pronouns you use. If you wanted to use like uh, non-gendered pronouns, I think that would work the same way. Um, I will say that, and this goes back to like query intent. If what you're publishing could be searched for verbatim, then you don't maybe want to like change the pronouns, right? So like if you have like a text that's maybe really well known, like lyrics or something like that, um, it might be tempting to go in there and take out all the gendered pronouns, but it probably would not be great for SEO. But again, like I said, I can't imagine a way that they would that would cause an issue. I don't think so.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
We have another question from the chat. What are the easiest wins for us to fold into our accessibility work in terms of SEO? I know you touched on this a little bit on your talk.
So I think some of the easy wins is to think about like I mentioned with some of the captioning content and some of the uh, transcripts for podcasts, that kind of stuff. Like for example, with YouTube, for example, if you have a captioning transcript that you uploaded with your video on YouTube, um, go ahead and paste that into the description of the YouTube page. And that will help that YouTube video rank higher in search engines, because that content is inaccessible to the search engines. That's a really good, easy win. Another easy win is to think about how your heading tags are optimized. You for accessibility, you want your headings to uh, to be descriptive of the content. Um, but if you can pull that off while also like plopping in a keyword here and there that might work really well for that page for SEO, that's a really smart move. um, and the title tag as well. Like really, for accessibility, you want really easy to read title tags, but if you can kind of combine that with the proper keyword usage, that really helps too. You know.
Yeah, I'm always a big fan of taking content you've already created and getting more leverage out of it. So if it's video content, taking the captions or the transcription. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Podcast, same thing. On that same note, do you? There are obviously like free captioning and translation tools, and then you can pay like a service like Rev to have it human edited. Do you think it's worth to pay for a professional to make sure that it's verbatim and like there's no errors in the computerized translation? Or do you think the computerized, the automated stuff that's either cheap or free is good enough? Or does it depend on the project?
For captioning,
Yeah,
I think it's probably a good idea to.
I'm not
Uh,
sure.
I
that
think
was
it's
my Alexa, sorry.
okay. I think it's probably a good idea to go ahead and integrate some human editorial stuff on your captioning. One of the things I like to do is I'll go ahead and like upload a video to YouTube, and I'll let the YouTube's automated captioning project do the captioning, and then I'll go back and edit those myself, because it saves me a lot of time of versus having to go out and like actually edit, everything. There is some stuff you can do. Like I work in digital marketing, so sometimes we'll have like uh, video content made, and when we do that, we'll have a script written ahead of time. And if you do that, then you've already got it written. You've already got the captioning written right there. You just have to put in the timestamps for it. So I think a good balance between the automated and the human kind of uh, approach is best.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, get the head start on the automated stuff and then clean it up a little bit yourself. Um, Excellent. Another question we got in the chat is how important is alt attributes in SEO ranking and accessibility?
So it's important for SEO. It's important for image search. So when you go to Google and you go to the Google image search and you type a question in or some keywords, you get a bunch of images. That's how Google ranks those images, is by using alt text and then also the text found around the image. And so for SEO, that's really important. But for accessibility, obviously, that's very important for screen readers. And, like I mentioned before, um, having a good balance between the two is important. I really think it's important to maybe go the accessibility route more when doing alt text. And if you're able to throw in some keywords, that's great. But at the end of the day, you don't want to just jam a bunch of keywords into the alt text, because that's not really good accessibility at all. And honestly, it's not really good for SEO either. SEO needs to be natural language, needs to have make sense to human beings and search crawlers.
Yeah, and I know Twitter, I believe, just launched their alt text feature for images
Yeah, they
on
did.
their platform.
It's been really nice. And that's been good because Twitter actually ranks really well for SEO. And so it's good for them because they're probably picking up a lot of new image searches because of that. And it also helps rank their images for people searching on web too. So that's good.
Yeah, we have another question. It says, would you say that the argument that accessibility professionals should not hide content also argues that if designers want text hidden, maybe it's better for all users that it stay visible?
I'm not sure I understand the last part of that question.
Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure on the context here. I kind of just read it. So maybe there is a user interface that maybe some text is hidden unless there's a certain element engaged with, versus
Okay,
maybe showing
so
that text at the first.
yeah, I understand now. So for SEO, um, Google's crawlers utilize Chrome. So they actually like Google's crawlers actually is based on Chrome now. And so what it does is it renders the page as if it's being opened in Chrome. However, it does not utilize a mouse. So user interface interaction does not really help with SEO. So if content is hidden behind a tab or a module or something that requires like user interface, a user interaction, SEO or search engines will not see it. And now this is actually a a kind of a debated topic among SEO nerds. Um, but generally speaking, we have to go with what Google says, and they say uh, they don't surface content that's not visible um, without user interaction. Now, that being said, like screen readers, for example, a lot of websites hide separate navigations just for screen readers, and I think that's fine. If you are hiding content that's just for screen readers, just make sure it's the same content that would be needed for SEO. Well, you don't want to hide anything that could have value from an SEO perspective. Um, you want to keep everything kind of visible, and so that the search engines can parse it and utilize it, in a visual format.
Uh, Certainly. Uh, Another question we got is, how do you prioritize to give focus to client content to rank more positively with SEO?
How do you prioritize
Uh,
client?
how I'm trying to parse the question. So I'm guessing they're meaning like, how do you work with clients to make sure that they get their message across, but you can do your job, with
Yeah,
SEO, like
yeah,
that
yeah,
balance between what the client copy wants and then
yeah,
also
yeah,
what the
yeah, yeah,
project requires.
yeah. So that's a difficult thing. One thing that, and I mean, I could probably write a book on this question, but I won't. So one thing that you can, it obviously it's different for every client, right? So some clients are going to be more flexible and be willing to change for SEO. Some clients are not. I think what you need to do as a professional is on your own time prioritize what's worth fighting for and what's not worth fighting for. Some things you need to understand that that it's the right thing to do, but really, is it going to move the needle for SEO? Probably not. So you don't really need to argue about it with your client. Um, you can, in some cases, and I do this a lot. In some cases, you can try to convince your client to create a whole different piece of content. Like I say, okay, you can keep this, because a lot of times clients like to have pages for things like paid search or social channels, that kind of stuff, and those things just don't work with SEO content. And so you can say, okay, we can keep these pages to use for advertising and that kind of thing, but let's create like a sister page that covers the same topics but is well optimized for SEO. And that usually works out really well because then you can focus all your time and priority on what we call those like SEO landing pages. Focus all your time and priority and SEO kind of perspective on those pages, and they get to keep their other content um, and do whatever they want with it.
Sure. And our last question is, what are your thoughts? Because I'm just going to summarize it. They're talking about keyword stuffing in the alt text, and what are your thoughts on that? But they added the specific question about adding hashtags into alt text.
I've never heard of that. So I mean, I don't think there'd be much value in that at all, um, unless that hashtag was something that you think people are going to search for on image search. Uh, but I don't really see that. I mean, like I said before, you really have to understand your query, your query intention, and your what is the motive behind searching, the query intent. And if you think that users are going to be searching on image search for a hashtag, then yeah, you can put that in your alt text. I don't really know if that's really beneficial, but I don't see a problem why you couldn't do that. Again, like, alt text is for accessibility, first and foremost. So if the image is somehow related to that hashtag and that makes a good description of the image, then absolutely do that.
Sure. We have a few more minutes, so I'm going to ask a question that I have that I'm wondering your thoughts on. Do TLDs affect the SEO? Because there's a new TLD every week. .vegas, .design, .vote,
So
.nyc.
So the answer is yes and no. So the answer is this: from a technical standpoint, no. Like from a technical standpoint, the algorithm kind of judges all TLDs the same. Um, from a realistic standpoint, there are a lot of other factors involved with SEO, and you have to ask yourself, like at scale. We're not talking about like small stuff. At scale, how easy is it going to be to get someone to link to like a dot network or a dot market? Like there's always different TLDs now, and .com tends to be the preferred one still because it has the public interest. The public knows about that. It's like in commonplace, uh, language now. So, all these other TLDs, it's hard to explain to people that might be linking to you, like, oh no, it's not .com, it's .market, or something that they maybe didn't even know existed. And so I would say that from a technical standpoint, no, TLD doesn't really matter too much. Um, it does matter though from a practical standpoint and how easy is it going to be to attract the needed signals. And I would suggest that everyone pass their domain through the telephone test, which is like trying to uh, tell someone the name of your website address over the telephone, and how easy is that to do without having to like spell it out, that kind of stuff. If your domain name can pass the telephone test, then it probably will work well for SEO. You know.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you so much, Joe, for your time. Everyone, you can get his deck on the website of the event, wpaccessibilityday.org, to view his slides. And you're also on Twitter if people want to continue the conversation, correct?
Yeah, please join me on Twitter at Joe Hall.
Cool. Please, when you're on Twitter, please tweet at us at WP Accessibility. Our hashtags are hashtag WP Accessibility Day and hashtag WPAD 2020. Up next at the 1 o'clock UTC time is Adam, and his topic is accessible navigation from scratch. So again, thanks to Kayla for moderating the chat, and I'll be back with you in about 15 minutes. Thanks.